Ever feel overwhelmed but no delegation could help? In this episode, Rebecca Vickers breaks down how smart delegation and managing up build trust, strengthen leadership, and keep you focused, even when distractions try to steal your time.
Welcome to Rise to Lead, the podcast where heart-driven leaders come together to inspire and innovate. They will share actionable tips and insights that help you lead your team more successfully, advance your career or business as a leader, achieve greater impact, and experience deeper fulfillment. I'm your host, Regina Huber, guiding you through deep conversations about leadership that's rooted in service, freedom, and the desire to leave a positive mark on the world. Are you ready to create real change in your leadership, your career, your life? Join me for a complimentary Lead and Thrive session, a 60-minute one-on-one strategy session where we will discuss your specific needs and map out the next steps to lead yourself and others powerfully. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Visit transformyourperformance.com/Lead Thrive session to book your Lead and Thrive session today. Let's work together to make it happen.
Welcome to Rise to Lead. With me today is another amazing guest, Rebecca Vickers from Georgia. Right? Rebecca, Georgia, that is. Okay, it's great to have you on, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat. You were on my podcast and now I'm on yours. So it's more like a continuing conversation.
Beautiful, beautiful. I always love to do those exchanges when they make sense, of course, so I'm glad you're here. And by the way, dear listeners, I am so grateful for you all. Thanks for being here. It's a privilege to inspire you through this podcast and today with Rebecca. Rebecca Vickers is a dynamic professional with experience in both digital marketing and operations. As VP of operations at FMO Media, she thrives on coaching her team, cultivating client relationships, devising successful strategies, and developing effective systems. Her goal is to foster stronger leaders, cohesive teams, and well-rounded individuals. That sounds already very awesome. So let's dive right into that, Rebecca. In the context of more cohesive and effective teams, what role does accountability play in your opinion? And if you want to lead up to that a little bit with a personal story, that's totally fine. I'm just really curious about this to start with. And by the way, I have a fly flying around here and I wasn't able to get it out. So if you see something hovering or flying around, if you're watching the YouTube video, that's my friend, the fly. Okay. So again, I'm going to repeat the question. In the context of more cohesive and effective teams, what role does accountability play in your opinion? I know you are, you'd like to talk about accountability. So why is that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, it can be a little bit of a nebulous word sometimes for folks. They don't know what accountability is. How do I hold people accountable? And I really believe truly that it starts with ourselves. We have to hold ourselves accountable first. And so if we are saying that we're going to do something, we need to follow through and do it. And if we're not going to be following in on what we have shared, then we need to communicate the why and what the plans are or the change of plans. And that's where I also feel leadership comes down to communication. Pretty much everything in life boils down to communication, right, Regina? But accountability is a huge part of being a leader. And I think it will differentiate the leader from the bad boss that I like to talk about, who micromanages because they don't know how to hold their teams accountable. But it really does, like I said, it has to start with us, and we need to set the example of what that looks like. So following through on what we say we're going to do, communicating when plans change, when they need to change, or when we all need to be flexible, and being kind and gracious to ourselves as well as other people and giving them the benefit of the doubt. But making sure that we have really clear standards, clear expectations so that when people do stray, when we stray, we know where we're trying to get back on track and how to realign with our goals, our objectives, whatever that plan might be, whether it's in work or life. And so that's why I believe that accountability is a large part of being a leader. That micromanager is really tempted to continuously check in and follow up. There isn't necessarily a whole lot of progress being made, though. It might feel a little bit more overbearing for your team. And I don't believe most of us like to be micromanaged anyway. So if you put yourself in your team member's shoes, would you like to constantly be checked in and followed up on? It can communicate some distrust. Accountability, on the other hand, is viewing individuals as autonomous and allowing them to take ownership over their work while still leaving room for guidance.
Okay, yeah. So micromanagement is, of course, a huge topic by itself, also in the context of delegation. Sometimes we want to delegate as leaders, but then we don't really feel comfortable because we think that, well, maybe we don't trust our team enough. And on the other hand, we want them to trust us, though. So that's that's sometimes interesting to observe, right?
Yeah.
Of course, yes, because we think sometimes that we do it in the best way, but there might be different ways of doing things that we have not actually explored yet. And, they are equally valuable.
Yeah, and it gives people an opportunity when you're delegating to allow them to grow and to be challenged. I was talking with another great leader, and we were approaching leadership from a behavioral point of view and understanding the behavior behind humans and why we do what we do. And a lot of us want to be challenged. It can be uncomfortable. It's not easy. Growth isn't something that feels good all the time. The reward is after a lot of effort, and sometimes it's brain power, sometimes it's more muscle and physical exertion too, or a combination of the both. But growth isn't easy, and we as leaders can provide safe spaces where our team members can thrive. And so if you learn to delegate effectively, and I don't mean you're dumping all of your tasks on people, right? We might have talked about this before too, Regina, but the understanding that there is a responsibility that you can bequeath to your team members versus simply giving them your to-do list and having them go off and do the tasks that you need to be doing as their leader, but rather what are some projects that are aligned with where they want to grow and go, and how can you help guide and coach them along the way. I think sometimes people think of delegation as, well, I'm handing off this responsibility and I don't trust the person because they're not going to know what I need or what I want or how it looks like. And that's where I would say, well, we need to be able to coach and give clear expectations and guide people if we're going to delegate a task. And they also need to know they can come to us and ask questions if they get stuck along the way too.
Yeah, again, it's about a lot of communication and building trust, right? Also, delegating with growth in mind, delegating really what's the right delegation, the right, the right task to delegate to a specific person, because
Yeah.
that also then requires actually knowing your team, knowing their strengths, and knowing what they're capable of in the first place. So talking more about accountability, what's one myth about accountability that you have found frustrating, and how do you really get people to take ownership?
I think it is just that, Regina. It is the understanding that you can't change people, they have to want to change, right? And so it can be very frustrating if you're working with team members who don't have that self awareness. You just talked about having awareness of your team, which is so important. And we might not, as leaders, talk enough about the importance of that. We talk a lot about self awareness, which I feel is equally important, maybe even more so as a starter for leadership, as part of that like leadership starter pack: communication, self-awareness, accountability. But knowing who is on your team, what their current capacity is, and how they're approaching their work, I would say taking it a step back. It comes down to who you're hiring to. Some of us might have a little bit more oversight in recruitment and hiring. Others might be working with the team that they are given, which might feel like a constraint. I like to encourage people to expand their thinking rather than imagining what you don't have. Who do you have on your team? What are their current capabilities? Talk to them, ask them what they're looking to do and grow into in their career, and how are they aligned with the company? Because if you're not growing, the company is not going to be growing, right? It takes all of us. We are the company. And so, in order to grow as a company, we need to be growing our individuals. And in order to help hold them accountable and give them that space for ownership, we need to give them the tools, the resources, the guidance, and also understand who they are and get that insight from them. And that's where it's not easy. It's easy to say, but it takes effort as a leader. And you have to create that environment where growth is an expectation, where ownership over your work is expected, and have very candid and professional conversations around that with your team members too. And so we're getting back to that communication again, but all of it is intertwined and in sort of the foundation, the bedrock of holding people accountable. And it starts, I think, with laying the expectations from the very beginning when you hire folks. And if you are not in that position, then having that conversation with the members on your team in reviews and one-on-ones to help give them that context and that clarity.
Right. And so I love that yes, you said everything is about communication in the end, and it is, because communication plays into every single aspect. There's no aspect of leadership that it does not play into, really, right? So yes, of course, it's again about communication. What I love, though, is also that you said, well, work with what you have and not with what you don't have. I personally also like to focus on solution finding rather than problem solving. So that it's just sometimes rephrasing things can already help us think in a different direction, in
You're
a
right.
direction that can actually create more meaningful results faster, right? Just because of a different way of thinking. Also, the importance of asking questions in those one-on-ones. For example, right, in those one-on-ones, you have the opportunity to really find out more about someone's aspirations, someone's challenges, someone's additional talents and skills that you might not even have known of so far, because they might not be included in that person's job description. So you might not, you might never have had that conversation before. So really ask open-ended questions as a leader that can oftentimes give us hints to so much hidden talent in our teams. Would you like to add anything to that at this point?
Well, I don't need to because everything you said was beautifully summarized, Regina. I will expand on the thought and take it a step further in a slightly different direction too, in the idea that in asking questions, we can help people develop their decision-making skills and help them take a little bit more of that ownership that we were just talking about too. So I'm glad you brought up the questions, because you're right. It makes me feel like if we're going into a one-on-one, if we're going into a review meeting and we're just talking at the person and talking at, we're not giving them room to take ownership over their work and to give us that insight that we need. And we're also missing out on a way to help them develop and grow their decision-making skills by asking questions, not saying that we always know the answer, but asking questions that can help guide them to the better decisions to help them then level up and become the better, the best at their job And so often I feel like if we just do the thinking for our team members, or we give them the SOP and make sure that they follow it to a T, but we don't ask them to solutioneer, as I like to call it. I think I stole that from Disney, but similar to you, we want to focus on solutions. And rather than just giving our team members solutions, I like to ask them to share their solutions with me too, or think through the process so we can generate those ideas together.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. And so let's talk about another topic that I find quite interesting. As VP of operations, right? I'm guessing that managing up is sometimes really critical.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, what is the smartest move you have made to earn trust with senior executives? What would you say?
It has been, I'm going to come back to it, communication, and sound like a broken record.
No, it's fine.
However, I'll expand on that too, because there are some, we could call them toxic, that might be a little bit extreme, but some traits around managing up that can lead to burnout and make folks feel like they're doing their manager, their supervisor's job. And so when I think about managing up, I don't ever want to encourage people to exhaust themselves or extend themselves beyond what they are physically, mentally able to handle, and to take rest, because I've certainly been in that place where you hustle really hard and you work really hard and you get burnt out in the process of taking on more responsibility or work than is required. And it can lead to some health challenges, or just to cause some frustrations. And I think a lot of us have maybe been there before. So I like to preface that managing up is not about doing your boss's job. It's really about making sure that whatever level you are on, you are sending the communication up to them. You're producing ideas, solutions, taking action, and being proactive when necessary and appropriate without overstepping. I also like to throw in that too, because we can be so eager to climb the ladder that we overstep and overreach, and it can cause some problems for not just our leaders, but the people who are around us too. So being mindful that we're not overstepping boundaries, but we're tactfully bringing communication that will help our leaders make the best decisions. That's how I like to see managing up, is how am I helping my boss or my leader, my supervisor, make the best decisions for the company by giving them the information that they need, or the knowledge or the insight, so that we can all grow. And so I like to have a little bit of a balanced approach, because I have heard people talk about managing up in ways that can produce some negative side effects. So I want to help people understand there's a healthy way to do that without overextending yourself to the point of exhaustion and burnout.
Right. So when someone manages up well, what are they actually doing that most people might miss? Can you give us just a few more examples? You gave us some already, but
Yeah, so specific examples, for me, I started doing end of day reports for myself and for my leadership team, and I would share briefs, not extensive, a lot of information, but what was the need to know? What do they need to know about how the conversation went with a team member that I had, or a meeting that I had? What was the outcome? And then what's the action step? Writing and documenting what I was doing, and making sure that it was transparent and visible, not just in those end of days, but also in having clear notes. And then in every company that I've been a part of, when there was not a clear system, instead of waiting for someone to develop that, I worked with the rest of the team members to develop that, and taking action and being proactive. A lot of it, at least for me, I can't necessarily speak to everybody else. Every industry is different, every role is different. But for me, Regina, I have been in situations, especially because of my marketing and management backgrounds, there's always a chance to improve what is already there. Not saying that it's broken necessarily, but times change, algorithms change, content changes, how we work changes. And so if you can approach your work and your job as seeking to help and to serve and to be someone who improves, I think of Kaizen, constant steady improvement. If we're
Mhm.
always looking to improve for the betterment of the company, our clients, and the people around us, then that is a huge part of, for me, managing up and making sure that I am doing my part and I'm finding ways proactively to do that, whether it's a system, whether it's communication, whether it's resolving maybe conflict between team members who are slightly at odds in a group. And then there's the reliability aspect of that too, Regina. And whatever I'm going to do, and this goes back to being a leader and being accountable. So full circle here, but if I'm going to be trusted with greater responsibility, then I need to follow through on what I say I'm going to do. And I need to follow up on that as well. It's not enough to simply do the job. You need to make sure that people understand that it is complete, it's done, so they don't feel like they have to come to you and ask if it has been done. And that's where end of day reports come in. That's where making sure the right communication is getting to the right person. We're not gatekeeping communication, knowledge, information, or the insights that'll help our leaders grow the company. So some options there and some practical tips, but I like to think of it from that sort of servant leadership mentality. You don't have to be in a position of managing people to be a leader of yourself and to serve the rest of your team.
Right. And I think what's also really important is to sometimes keep that communication concise, right?
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
Because we need to also consider that the people who are above us in a certain structure, organizational structure, they often oversee several different bigger areas, or maybe it's one area, but it's quite complex. So they cannot always deal with a whole load of information. If you do, for example, daily follow-ups or daily daily information flow pieces, right?
Oh, it can
Whatever
be a
you
lot.
call them. But yeah, so also putting yourself in the shoes of that person can also help, I believe. Also because we are different personality types. And there are, of course, leaders who are more maybe you're familiar with the color cue, Rebecca, more the blue type, the big picture people, or more the other color types. I'm not going to go into the details now. There are so many different tests anyway that people might have taken, but we know that there are different personality types, and as such, we work differently and respond differently to situations, and also we communicate differently, of course. So it's really a good idea if you want to manage up to find out a little bit, even if you do not have the test results of a personality test for your manager, but to just
Yep.
really observe, what personality type is that? There's no need to put a name or a title to it. It's just really, observing how does this person communicate, what works for them, what works for me, and how can we gain common ground in that sense.
That's a great point, Regina. And it comes back to that awareness that we were talking about too, right? There's the self-awareness, and then there's awareness as a leader for your team. But at the same time, if we are looking to level ourselves up and grow, and we're looking to manage up so that we can have that greater responsibility and trust, knowing what your leadership needs and how they communicate and their preferences can go a long way in how you're building a relationship with them too. And you're right, we might we might not get our leaders to all take tests and share their personality, but as you start to work with someone and ask them questions too, how do they want to be reported to? What kind of information do they need? I'm absolutely in agreement with you. I think communication can be concise and comprehensive, and leaders can still get what they need from that, or they know where they can go to get that information. It doesn't have to be overwhelming or time consuming for the rest of us, but you're right. When you know how to best communicate with that person and stay flexible and agile, then you're going to have stronger relationships, and you're going to be able to show that you can handle higher levels of communication too.
Yeah. So do you have any example in your experience when something related to communication blew up?
Oh my goodness. A lot of examples. I would say that one example I share with team members when they're first joining at FMO is a story happened a couple years ago. We have Slack that we use for our team communication. It's all internal, and we have specific channels dedicated to different types of communication so that we're not getting bombarded with a lot of different comments and requests in one singular chat that can get lost. And so it's very organized, very structured. And I go through the same onboarding sort of prompt guidelines at the start of every person's journey with us. And that's that we have communication channels. There's a channel for you to talk to your managers as well. You can always reach out to me directly if you need help or support or guidance. However, please do not direct message team members about work, because this is how work gets lost, communication mishaps happen, and the wrong message gets relayed, or people lose track of something because it's not in the appropriate channel. And it happened, Regina, one time we had a team member receive edits for a deliverable from their client, and another person was out for the day. So they took the edits and the communication into a private message with a third person who wasn't able to work on that particular deliverable. And guess what? Edits didn't happen. They didn't get to the right person. And the client saw that, and the client blew up in their chat with us. How they handled it, whether it was professional or not, it was understandable, right? They thought that we were on top of it. It had been communicated that we would make those changes. And then we dropped the ball because we completely went off our standards of communication and we kept other people out of the loop. And so that's why, for me, communication is a huge part of everything we do in life, and making sure that we're over communicating. You can still be concise, but making sure that we're over communicating very clearly with the people that need to know and need to be aware so that we can all serve each other better.
Oh, I'm more on the side of the over communicator. That can be a little bit heavy sometimes too. So I have to really control myself.
We're very alike, I'm sure, in
But-
that way. I will say, I would rather get this message from a client, but there was one time, and it's only happened once, where we were told, hey, y'all are great communicators, but I need you to stop. It's too much. And that's where I would rather be getting those messages from clients or from team members than the other situation where a client feels like they've been forgotten about, or a team member feels like they've been forgotten about because something was missed or something wasn't clearly communicated, whether it's expectations, instructions, or otherwise. We want to make sure that we have that free flowing channel. And I would add too, to sort of summarize or wrap up, there can be a lot of fear around communication, and we might fear the response from the other person. So as leaders, it's really important for us to set up a space where people do feel they can approach us and come to us. And if they've made a mistake, they know they can bring it to us and share how they're going to course correct. And as team members, if you have a leader above you, take courage and own your work and own whether it's a mistake or a solution you're bringing to the table. Be confident in that, regardless of what's been set up for you. Having that confidence and that courage can also go a long way too.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So talking about feedback, you just talked about feedback from a client.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about, has there ever been a time for you when someone from your team gave you feedback that hit hard in some way? But then it turned out to be really, really critical, and it might have even changed everything or been truly valuable.
Yeah, so there have been some times first I'll say I follow Kim Scott and her ideas around radical candor, and not just giving feedback, but also asking for feedback too. And I know it's not just her and her book, but other wonderful thinkers all believe in that 360-degree approach. So I like to ask for feedback whenever possible. And usually it won't necessarily take you by surprise, but there have definitely been times when the feedback coming to me comes from either confusion or it might not be a lack of communication, but it might be one person assuming they understand what's going on. And it could be myself or it could be the other person. But even when one person assumes, or when someone has a different style or method of communicating, maybe we even define words differently, especially in the creative field. That's where a lot of a gap can occur, a lot of communication confusion can happen. And so you start to receive, if you're asking the right questions, you can receive some information or insight or feedback that might completely throw you. I had a conversation with a team member recently where we were going back and forth, and it was in a chat situation, and I said, hey, let's hop on Zoom and let's talk through this, because we're missing the mark here, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page. And we were literally missing the mark in our words, because we were defining things differently. And we even went back through our written communication and realigned on what each other meant, so that we could have a more robust understanding of each other's point of view and the feedback we were giving each other and the insight that we needed to move forward with our project. And it felt a little bit like a rumble of sorts, and a little bit of headbutting. At the end, it was very constructive and very helpful, because we were able to see each other's viewpoint a little bit differently and better. So I will say, I encourage all leaders to ask for feedback on a regular basis, because it will help you develop more self-awareness, so that you're not caught off guard as often by some unpleasant feedback. I would say too, sometimes, we have to be mindful that communication isn't just what we say, but how it's received as well. And I've definitely fallen into the trap where you might have the best kind of conversation planned out, and you might say everything that you intended to say and share, and the other person might not be in the right place to hear that. And it takes practice. I think I'm still practicing learning how that other person is handling and receiving the feedback, and making sure that you're approaching them in a way that is understood by them, and we're not just simply talking and hoping that it lands and resonates.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are always practicing in that sense,
Yeah.
because it's not always the same people we talk to. And even if it's the same person, it's a different day. We all
Yep.
have days and days. We all have our conversational blind spots, and they vary from moment to moment, because sometimes we might be in fear, we might feel a certain emotion, and that might put us into a conversational blind spot in that particular situation. Also, our brain shuts off every few seconds to process information we hear, so that we don't really hear everything anyway, right? You know all this. But yeah, so it's just something to consider and remind ourselves every single time we have a conversation. No one's the same person every single day, even if, they are the same person we work with. So
Yep. I love that. That is a great reminder, Regina.
So yeah, and let me just ask you something a little bit different. So you've coached a lot of people in your teams, right? So what's one pattern that you have seen either frequently or repeatedly that quietly could ruin a career?
So I would shaking it up a little bit, because communication could certainly be a part of that, but offering a different perspective on this one. I would say that a lot of it can come down to time management and knowing how to prioritize your time, whether it's throughout the week or the day. And similar to communication, we're all still practicing that, right? There's a nuance to time management where we can be proactive and we can plan ahead, but we also need to understand that change is constant. So at the same time, being agile and flexible and able to pivot. I know that word's overused after COVID, but we need to be able
After
to
the
be,
lockdown.
yeah, exactly. We still need to be able to take that agile approach and redirect ourselves when life throws us a curveball, when there's something external outside of our control that we need to navigate. And so the more proactive you are with what is in your realm of control, the easier it is to be flexible and to be agile. And one of the things that I have seen a lot in folks, and they have struggled, and there have been some folks who've been really successful and been able to be promoted to manager and managing people, and now coach and train on the same ideas of time management. However, a lot of folks start out with that sort of big question mark, or feeling lost or overwhelmed, and not having the tools and resources to navigate that for themselves. And I think it's totally valid and completely fine for us to feel overwhelmed. It's a feeling, it's normal, it happens. And if you are open to receiving the tools and the resources and the guidance on how to navigate that, you can do very well. In the same way that if you learn how to prioritize and make decisions, not just for yourself, but for the greater good of your team, the company, what's best for your clients, you're going to be able to stay focused and not let distractions overwhelm you, which can be really hard in today's age of technology consuming us, our attention, social media bombarding us with notifications, Slack messages going off. However, I do feel like it's really important for us to stay focused, to know what our priorities are, know where we can pivot and where we can be flexible. That is going to be another great foundational piece for anyone looking to grow, whether you are looking to manage people one day or simply level yourself up into a specialist role. Being able to zero in on your priority for the day, your priority for the week and the month and the quarter, and then understanding your company's goals and objectives will help you stay that track, that course, so that you can continue to make progress. But one of the biggest challenges that I see with folks, especially earlier in their career, but even for some really strong managers, is learning to be proactive with their time and being able to avoid distractions and that shiny object syndrome that can also creep in.
Right. And because we talked about definition of words earlier, I just want to come back to that term, even time management. I actually personally never use that term at all because I believe we cannot manage time anyway. There's no such thing. But I know also, I remember that you also said you added the word prioritize
Yeah.
after. So that's really what it's about, right? It's really about prioritizing your tasks, your activities, your your resources also, and everything that you can manage within a specific time period, because the time itself we cannot really manage. So I'm a little bit of a wordsmith here sometimes, and I'm only bringing it up because earlier we talked about how we define words and what words we use. So I think sometimes it also actually helps us to really think about, okay, does that term really make sense, or is it something that was just, laid literally on our tongues and in our mouths and put in our mouths, so we use it. And I think sometimes just by changing the terms we use, that can already give us some hints about what we actually can do about something, you know. So prioritization tells me something that gives me something that I can work with. You know what I mean? So I'm not
Oh, yeah.
judging in any way the word you said. I'm just
No,
coming
I
back
love.
because I love to talk about those terms. And
Yeah.
and then the other thing that I want to quickly talk about is when we talk about overwhelm, it's really important to remember that overwhelm is you called it a feeling. It's also, in a way, it's also a thought process, right? So it's a combination of a feeling and a thought process or whatever. It's actually oftentimes fear, if we
Yeah.
go to the gist of it. And it's important to remember that it is self-created, meaning we can also uncreate it. We can also do something about it. It doesn't have to take over because it's actually us who create that overwhelm. through certain thoughts, right? The rest is just a situation. It's a situation might often be challenging, especially when a lot of things are happening at the same time, for sure. It can result in stress, and it results in stress or overwhelm if we let it. So I always like to talk about this as well, because we often see these things, these phenomena, they're not really things, as phenomena that come from outside. But they are, while they're influenced by external circumstances, they don't really come from outside, they come from inside of us. So that's a whole other conversation for another day, but I do want to bring this up for our listeners to think about if they haven't already. I'm sure a lot of people have. So anyway, as a side, I'm super passionate about this.
I think that's a great perspective, Regina. And I think you're right. I mean, we can't manage time. Unfortunately, it's the sort of go-to catch-all. I like how you said it's laid out on our tongues. We sort of
Right.
we take that on. If we can change that, I would be happy to be a part of that movement to change how we talk about it too. And that's why if we were to simply say, well, you have to manage your time better, or, oh, you're just feeling overwhelmed, and we don't define what we mean by that or how to handle that. Or, for me, overwhelm is something that can be changed by taking action. And it doesn't have to be a big action. It could be a small step towards whatever that task is, or maybe it's simply writing a list of what I'm planning out to do, and I feel a little bit more release from that feeling and that thought process. But I absolutely agree. I love your mind and where your mind is at. And that's where I believe a lot of these words that we do overuse, if we simply just speak the phrase or we say the word, but we don't give examples or help define it or change what the words are, then we're going to be stuck and people aren't going to know how to move forward, and we'll probably be overwhelmed and continue in that pattern.
I mean, one such other term is work-life balance. Makes zero sense to me. First of all, you get frustrated if you ever will look for the balance, because it's never going to be there. It might, sometimes there's more weight on one side, sometimes there's more weight on the other. So it's really harmony that we seek usually. And then, of course, also work is part of life. So where's the, work-life balance? Is work one thing and life another thing? I don't get that. So I'm just like, okay, I want to work with terms that actually give me value so that I can do something about it. So when I say I manage my priorities, I manage my activities, especially also for people who don't even have control over their calendars, their own calendars, right? That happens in certain roles. So if you tell them to manage their time, they will look at it and say, okay, how should I do this, right? If everybody messes with my calendar in the first place. And then, of course, the calendar is also not the same as the time. But anyway, but, it just can be very confusing and actually frustrating because we cannot do it, but constantly are asked to do it. Now, I have one other question for you today, Rebecca. If you had to ban one leadership cliche forever, which would it be and why?
Oh, one bad leadership cliche. Oh, this is tough. A bad leadership cliche. I'm trying to
So
think of
if you had to
something that's
ban one, prohibit one.
prohibit. So, all right, there are a couple. I try to use examples that I've experienced too, and one that I have a huge pet peeve about is saying, "Hey, do you have time to talk?" or "Hey, let's talk." As a leader, if you share that with your team, you're immediately putting them on defensive. You're probably making them anxious and scared, and they don't know what you want to talk about. They can't read your mind. You might innocently want to talk to them about some feedback, or you might want to share something completely other than work, and it might be something fun and a cool announcement or otherwise. But when you put someone in a position where you're not clear about what the conversation is, then you're not creating a psychologically safe space for them to work and thrive and feel like they can have a conversation with you. So whatever the conversation is about, and it might be a difficult conversation. There are ways that you can tactfully approach that too. I like to tell the person why we're meeting and give them that heads up so that they're coming to that meeting with more insight, a little bit easier approach to it, and more open to having that conversation rather than feeling like they have to be defensive. And if it is a difficult conversation, I like to at least let them know, hey, I want to have a conversation about what just happened, or hey, let's chat about how this situation was handled. And that way they understand that we might have a slightly difficult, challenging conversation, but I'm letting you know so that you can mentally prepare for that. I think that goes a long way in creating psychological safety. I tell all my managers to do the same for me too. If you need to talk to me about something, at least give me a heads up on what it might be if you can, so that I can help prioritize time. If it's something urgent and important, then let me know. If it's something that can wait, then I know that I can meet with you at a later time and it's not going to impact you in a negative way. So that would probably be my biggest pet peeve. There are others, but that's the one
Okay.
that I like to coach others on too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It also, if we think that it's something really serious and it's not even that, and then, our mind stays busy all day with that and we cannot even focus on it, on the work at hand. So
Yeah.
it's definitely useful, even if it is something that we are not too happy about in the moment, or that it also gives us an opportunity to prepare a little bit if that's needed. And I think that's just fair, right? So, Rebecca, what's the best place for people to connect with you?
Well, I love chatting with people on LinkedIn. You can find me, my name, Rebecca Vickers, on LinkedIn. And then I would love it if anyone wanted to tune into the podcast, Bad Bosses, Great Leaders, with wonderful guests like yourself, Regina, who joined me, and others. We're talking about all these topics. I learn a lot from all of my guests, and it has definitely enhanced my leadership. And I know that my audience is probably similar, maybe even overlaps with yours, Regina. We're all here to learn and grow from each other. So I love to be able to help and serve others. Feel free to reach out and message me if you have any questions or thoughts, or just want to talk about leadership.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for being a wonderful guest, just like you were a wonderful host.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, and for sharing your insights, and definitely stay in touch. To all listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Rise to Lead. Keep shining your light, standing up for what's right, and inspiring others to step into their brilliance. If you like this episode, please give it a 5-star rating and subscribe to the Rise to Lead podcast on your preferred podcast app. Until next time, it's Regina Huber, and in the meantime, remember to rise to lead.